today, the topic, it'll take little over, I would say, 50 to 60 minutes. I'll try to, it's a combination of, I'll just talk about the concept as well as how the platform offering some of the underlying concepts, some of the problems it tries to solve and all that. Along with that, there are few demos of that application which I would also show today, right? So as I mean, talk to your data. It's imagine, think about it. Just hold on one second. Okay. So that's I'm part of Purple Slate. It's like iLink Digital. It's a family of companies with quite a bit of different business units focusing on different technology areas. So I'm one of the co-founder of this company, Purple Slate. We focus on primarily conversational AI related platforms and products. Um, Basically, it's anything around leveraging natural language processing, voice-based technologies, and all that, right? So, in fact, one of the use case and then the platform offering that I'm going to show today, it leverages these technologies. I'll just quickly show that as well, right? So, just to quickly start with, this context on, hey, what exactly is conversational AI, right? So, it's basically the application of, which uses um, language as the interface. When we say language, it's how we communicate, or rather, how we interface with other peers today. Most of the messaging devices, telephony, and all that. Similarly, this same interface, it's also being increasingly used for business services, consumption of data. I'm sure many of you would be familiar with the whole craze around what's happening in the chat GPT world, where you just ask a question, the system kind of responds back and all that, right? So before I get into the concepts, let me quickly share my screen and then just get you started on this particular application, what how we are really trying to leverage this for business intelligence or data analytics. Let me just give me 1 second here. I'm going to share my mobile phone. Okay. Can you see my mobile phone? Bharat, somebody, can you confirm?
Yes, it is visible.
Okay. Imagine, just like how we use a messaging device, right? Whether it is Microsoft Teams or anything, WhatsApp, iMessage, how we communicate with fellow human beings. So there is a whole bunch of data sets here, right? Some of them are grouped in folders and all that. It's imagine, if these data sets were like fellow human beings, where we can just chat. So I'm going to pick up one. So it's something, this is data set on, say, the logistics industry, information about, shipments and all that. So I'm just going to ask a question on, hey, show me, it's like, daily trend of shipments in Georgia. It's so there is a voice response as well as, what it does is on any specific data set, it could be anything, however big, the data set could be in the form of files, databases, whatnot, right? You literally have the ability to, just like how we chat with, human beings. It's like, you have an ability to ask these questions, on these data sets. So I asked for a trend, so it just gives me the number, and then, it also gives me a trend. And it provides me a whole bunch of stuff. So now I can also I asked a question about Georgia. So now, I can ask, hey, how about Washington? Right. So it just helps me have a conversation. So it's like, since we talked about the trend of shipments in January 2019 in Georgia, now the next, I just used a pronoun and then, I asked, hey, how about Washington? Is just going to give me the same information for a different state now. So similar to that, I can just use any of the data sets. Say, for example, I'm just jumping into another data set here, so it's just like chatting with someone else, right? So, I mean, again, for the sake of time, let me just pick up something here. Hey, show me the profit. I mean, the question is more like this. It's like, whatever I have done, some of the questions, which I had asked in the past. So I have this information. Hey, show me the profit in the second quarter of 2018. All these stuff, I mean, it just not, it gets me the underlying data. Um, so this pretty much at a high level is what I thought I'll just set some context before I jump into the underlying concepts around how we achieve it and all that. So this application, what we call is, I mean, Kia, it's not just in the mobile application. I mean, during the course of this session, I will also show you the other channels, which we have. But I thought I'll just to set some context, I will start with quickly a demo like this. I mean, so basically, whole bunch of data sets, you train, and then, we have, I'll also talk about the technology on how we achieve this. Now, it's just like without writing a single line of code, I mean, the application kind of responds back or gets you that information, what the question, whatever, we were asking, right? So that it's at a high level, it's what, this session is about, how do we leverage conversational AI related technologies, for business intelligence or, and I mean, in fact, the trademark, what we have is that it's called top tier data. If when we say data, it could be, as I said, of any volume, any variety, wherever it is, it's like files, databases, whatnot, data warehouses. You really have an ability, just when you train this data set on, using our platform, you have this ability to dynamically ask questions on this, without writing code. I mean, there is a lot more you can do. I'll also show that during the course of this session, right? So if you've been, I mean, for anyone who has worked on, business intelligence, I mean, these are some of the very familiar, the challenges we face today. I mean, the analytics effort take forever. It costs more. There are costs at various levels, right from data engineering to how we build the different reports and dashboards, the changing requirements, and I mean, you have different user personas, each one of them having their own information need, and every time, you just keep creating more dashboards or additional dashboards or modifying them and all that, right? I think definitely there is a huge amount of cost, especially with the amount of data that is being collected today. Almost every enterprise, every business today is a technology, or rather, digital business. So it's like there is a huge amount of data that's getting collected, and then, for us to get any meaningful information or dashboards or insights, it just costs that much more. And the second one, I mean, pretty much anybody who has worked on business would be able to easily relate to this. Just too many dashboards and scorecards. I mean, because you have different users, each one of them have a different information need. You just end up creating just too much of them. And metadata, again, it's becoming increasingly a challenge, in terms of trying to understand what those data elements are, what those attributes are. There is this conflict between the technology terms versus the business terms, and how do we really manage them using a data glossary, data catalog, and all that. And self-service BI, which was supposed to be so much useful for the business folk, or rather the non-technical folks, to produce their own insights. Even that is becoming increasingly complex. And then, so there is always this intermediary layer of, having to build your own models or the semantic layer before someone can just use a drag and drop interface, to create the dashboards and all that. So self-service is really not, I would say, quote unquote, self-service. I mean, having said this, right? The other thing is, I mean, even though, as I said, today, every enterprise is a digital enterprise, there is I mean, there are some statistics which says, information workers spend a significant amount of time, really looking for that information, whether it is to take actions, make decisions, and all that, right? I'm sure, some of you would have seen this graphic, which is kind of very famous in the big data world. It's like most of the big data or the insights problem, it is a signal and noise problem. I mean, it's like you have a huge collection of data. Within that, there is this very small subset, which is relevant, which is interpretable, and then, which really forms that information. And within that, and there is, if you really are looking for a specific piece of information, right? One is the signal, which could be the answer. There are also, especially with the huge amount of data which we're collecting, what we call as the unknown or the insights. Oh wow, I didn't know this. Those kind of hidden patterns and which are kind of latent, which are not easily visible. How easy it is for us to uncover those insights. I think those are some of the common problems we have today, right? So having said this, what we're really trying to do is how can we solve this problem, of locating this signal or the small set of information, which is useful, as well as, how do we really uncover insights, using a conversational AI approach is what, we're just going to talk about today, right? And also, I mean, this is one very interesting graphic I saw in, it's like this anything else in our life, I mean, whether it is hailing a Uber cab or everything else, it's kind of the time is shrinking, right? Why shouldn't that be the same thing, for even information access? Or let me also put it this way, for every other information need, for our personal life. I mean, we always rely on the search engines, whether it is Bing or Google, we just go and ask that question. Why shouldn't that experience be so similar, where we have access to instant information, for all our business needs? I think that's where, I mean, I think the whole business intelligence offering for the modern world or the AI first world, I mean, has to be reimagined. How is that? How do we really achieve that? Or rather replicate a similar experience, even for the enterprise data. And some, just little context on, if you really take today's data rich world, right? I mean, there is a huge amount of data is being collected. Users still struggle, to get access to quality data. And the third one is what, I was also sure it's whether we are in a meeting or whether we are meeting a customer or in an airport. I mean, there is always this one question, which we have, even when we are doing a presentation, on some reports, there is always this one question, which is not covered as a metric, and which we normally end up calling somebody or, hey, I would like to, I'll get back to you on that. I think those kind of momentary, information needs, right? Imagine the similar scenario where, when we have something like that for a personal need, we have this ability to chat with somebody. Hey, what? Can you just answer this? Or rather, we call someone. Hey, can you tell me, what happened this, right? Why shouldn't that same thing be, why can't that be, the same experience could be replicated for data? Why can't we just, like what I just showed, using the mobile app? Can I really ask those kind of questions, whether it is I'm in front of a customer or I'm at the airport or, I have a need, where I'm just looking for a piece of information where I can just ask someone very similar to how we might call or message somebody, right? So that's one way, I mean, rather in one way, we're trying to replicate that experience for data, right? Um, and the other thing is, I mean, whether we are looking at a report or we are looking at a dashboard and different metrics and all, right? At the end of the day, there is a question, which we have in our mind. That's what, we are trying to get an answer to by looking, or rather trying to interpret those metrics or reading those charts, right? So there is always this bit of cognitive load. Hey, what? Even when I'm looking at a chart, I have a question, I'm just trying to get an answer by interpreting the trend of that line or, or the bar chart and all that, right? So at the end of the day, if you really look at it, there is a whole bunch of questions. I think, that's what we have, which we're really trying to get an answer, from reports and dashboards and all that, right? And the modern day information needs is also changing drastically, right? I mean, one is how do we get insights from very, very large volume of data at this very moment? I mean, and also with an ability to collaborate and, with it's like not using different tool sets. Hey, what? I have one BI report, I take a screenshot, put it in an email, send it to somebody, and then, I go to another application, I take it, I download this data, I export it, all these kind of fragmented tool sets are also becoming more of a challenge, right? So how do we, I mean, or rather, the problem statement is more like this. How do we make enterprise data easily available? At the same time, I mean, the last point is also extremely critical in a very, very secure manner. I mean, both in terms of privacy, who can see what, as well as the sensitivity of the information. I mean, you have PII information, I mean, not getting, or rather, it's getting exposed to the right people, all of that in a very, very secure manner without compromising privacy and security. How do we make information access very, very simple, right? I think that's a problem, which we are trying to solve, right? So little more context, in terms of how, I mean, just on the BI, business intelligence and the data world, right? I mean, if you really look at it, this is the way that whole ecosystem has evolved. Information systems, you started from, I mean, if you go back few decades, it's from the mainframe computers to, they were used increasingly, used for data processing. You had reports, spreadsheet applications became popular with the PC generation. And as more and more computers were used for data processing, you ended up creating a lot of business intelligence reports, dashboards, mobile BI, for people on the move, especially with the smartphone, popularity and all that. But all of that now, in the next generation, how is this BI world going to really mature, right? I think that's also a very good question to have. If this is the way we have been consuming information, how is this going to really get transformed, either for the next few years and then in the coming days? That's what, we really mean by, it's like, can an approach through conversational AI, can that create a solution more for, for the future, right? And also, if you really look at it, how do we really get our answers? Even this without even having a computer or any of these stuff, right? I mean, whenever we have an information need, we ask somebody who's knowledgeable, and then we get answers. Usually, answers kind of trigger more questions, and then we keep asking those questions till we get our answer, and finally, we take a decision. In fact, this is the way we kind of use data to do our analysis, finally, using that for decision making, right? Now, look at how the analytics world of today is, right? One familiar, problem, which I'm sure, many of us would have, it's what we call as the death by metrics. You just have too much of numbers, charts, dashboards, and reports, just too many of them, right? The other thing is information, especially when we talk to the business people or the non-technical people. I mean, we do work with a lot of doctors and all that. It's information access is still too technical. It's like you have to go through IT teams to produce those reports or dashboards, or rather, you really need to be reasonably for you to get access to that information, or or rather produce those KPIs and all that, right? And in the cycle, which we just saw, when we are trying to get answers to our questions, this part about, asking a trusted resource, getting answers, I think that one, even if you put the IT team to the picture, between the business teams and IT teams, I think this is a significant problem in most of the organizations today, where there is a lot of delays in terms of each request really becoming a project, someone really, trying to implement that, and then, and making changes, all these things, it's kind of, even though we have what we call as quote unquote self-service business intelligence tools, the information access, you may not have the right data element. Somebody might have to bring the data back, and then someone has to create a new metric. If there is a slightly different version of the metric, someone has to make a change to the metric or the dashboard. I think this kind of iterative fashion, work, it's really costs a lot of delays, and then some to the point that it is extremely painful, right? So this is, in fact, people even call this as this infinite loop of data and BI projects. So when the business or the consumer has a need, like, hey, what, this is I need this information, and then the data, they may ask the person, who knows this, he may say, hey, what, I don't have this, open a project now, and then so it's like they may not have the data elements, so the data engineer may have to make some changes to the pipeline to bring the data. and then the application engineer has to make the changes. So this kind of goes in a loop, and that whole process before the business users really get access to that kind of, it's what we really call as, it takes a lot of time, resources, and more than that, it is the time or the delays, you have before someone could use that piece of information, right? I think that's kind of what I put in here in terms of having this as the operational overhead. It does slow down many of the stuff. I mean, people do spend a lot of time. The person who has to really take business decisions, instead, they just keep spending time on many of these way of getting access to this data or creating those metrics and all that. And also, I mean, there is a whole amount of budget and money, and which is spent on in this whole process, right? So bottom line, what we're really saying is, if you really look at the modern world, it's like the modern information access challenge. It's not about the capture and store. Almost every organization today, which is digital, they do have huge corpus, very, very large volumes of data of multiple variety and all that. I think, the problem has kind of shifted more on the access part of it. It's like, in fact, even the cost of storage has become extremely economical. The unit cost of storage has come down. So it's like the data collection is being, it's very good, but how do you really make this data or leverage this data for information access? How do you make it easy available to other users? I think that's where the challenge is, right? So that's what we're going to talk about, in terms of how do we simplify this using a conversational AI approach, right? And there is also one term, which I just want to bring in here. It's called findability and discoverability, right? So just some examples. Findability is about, you have a specific question. Hey, what, how many critical vulnerabilities do we need to address? So you have an answer. More than that, when someone says 27, but do you know that out of the 27, X percentage are in the mobile? Oh, I didn't know this, right? I think how does these tools or, the modern day business intelligence tools help the users uncover insights like this, which are kind of very latent, and how easy it is for users to uncover these hidden insights. I think that is extremely critical because of the huge volume of data, we have been talking about these days, right? Or rather, it's like this. I mean, as I said, this is what we really mean by the insight. Oh, I didn't know this. That's interesting kind of moments. How do we have tools which create these moments, right? So how do we really do this? Having talked about the set of challenges, and then what could be the potential need for the business intelligence tool of this generation? How do we really, achieve it, right? Can, as I said, just like how we would talk to fellow human beings, instead of just relying on a static report or a dashboard, can we just have them ask somebody? I mean, it's like, in the absence of tools, most likely we would call somebody. Hey, what, someone who's more knowledgeable. Hey, can you tell me how is this? Can you tell me what happened to this? I think similar questions or similar conversations can we really have with an application, right? It's have given some examples here, in the language they speak. It's like, hey, for an insurance company, hey, what is the incurred claim ratio for this travel plan protection? Now show me the usage on mobile. Maybe, we just launched a mobile app recently. We, are interested to know how the app is being used. So can you show me the usage on the mobile platforms in the last 6 months or whatever the time frame is, right? So all these kind of questions, what we have, whether we are in a meeting or taking a decision, say, for example, we would like to know, we ran a marketing campaign for a certain product last month. We want to know how successful that campaign is. Or say, for example, we launched a new product and we want to know how it's being used. Hey, what is the sales in this particular product for the last 2 months? We see that, so it's not doing well. Maybe what we would really like to do is maybe for this particular region, or we would like to run a campaign. How do you even integrate this answer with an action, right? That's pretty much how most of the businesses really use information. I mean, or it could be like this. Hey, I am a CIO. I'm responsible for my technology organization. How much, my goals are around, managing the IT expenses, right? So what is my consumption last month? How much did we spend on CPU? How much did we spend on compute versus the storage costs? Hey, is it really trending down? who's really consuming this? All these kind of questions, which really help us manage our operations or manage our business, those are all, can we really have them in a conversational approach? I think like how we would have done it today using dashboards and reports, can we really make it, extremely dynamic? And then, can we just have a conversational interface, just like, how we would ask someone knowledgeable, right? So, I mean, just kind of given an example to contrast it. So if we've been consuming dashboards like this, hey, where are we spending the most? It could be like a dashboard where I have a bunch of like 4 KPIs on that particular dashboard. It gives me a piece of information. The problem is always that there is one metric, which is missing here, which we would like to rather, either we start creating that additional metric, or hey, what, there is a new data point, which I don't even have here. Perhaps, we'll just go back and try to make changes to this dashboard and add that metric. I think that's the way it is kind of growing. Rather, why can't it just be an open interface, on the data set? Why can't people just ask any question? Just like, I have given an example on the right. Hey, which region is doing well? So it responds back saying, hey, this is that. It also says, by the way, it is it's been going down, and this is all these kind of, I mean, one is getting the answer as well as trying to uncover some insights. I think that's what we really mean by a conversational approach, right? So let me just quickly introduce you here to our platform. In fact, our platform is called Kia. If you're just curious, just a tidbit, but Kia is a parrot species. Why we even named this our platform as Kia is called. It's a parrot species found in New Zealand. It's supposed to be one of the smartest bird species. I mean, they do. There are some very interesting reads about it in the sense it solves even statistical problems. I mean, there was some research done on how these problems are. I mean, how these birds are so smart and all that. So when we were trying to name this, so we thought, hey, it would be more appropriate to call it as Kia. So that's a little bit of tidbit on why we named the platform as Kia and all this, right? So here is an example. So it's like this. If you're looking at, hey, your cloud infra storage, I mean, so you just had, hey, by certain dimensions, you just want a certain time frame, you just ask this question, right? Let me quickly show you one. So this platform, I mean, as it's available in, as I said, in the beginning, I showed you the mobile application. It's for anybody on the move, you can use the mobile application, or the way, some of our customers use it is on a most like having the right, virtual data analyst in the meeting room, just like, you can both in the voice interface as well as, in chat, you can just ask this question, something like, hey, get me the vaccine schedule for this, show me, the average claim for influenza, in this particular region, all these kind of, you just questions you just ask, just like how we would ask human beings, right? So in this particular one, let me start with some simple examples here. Hey, what? Okay, so just give me 1 second. Any questions before I show a quick demo of this? Any questions from anybody? Okay, so there are a couple of interfaces, which we have. See, as I said, I'll also show you how we, the whole training process happens and all that. I mean, there is a whole bunch of data sets I have. I have my own data sets. Somebody can share a data set with me. I mean, when we say data sets, these are just not Excel sheets. Okay, so it's basically when you have some, data set. I mean, can somebody just ask a question on this? I think that's what we are achieving, but it is not as simple as it is not limited to an Excel sheets or CSV. I mean, there are applications we have which run against huge database systems, across multiple tables, any kind of database systems, be it Snowflake, Postgres, Mongo, wherever the data set is, Elastic, very, very large volumes of data. And then, it's the platform kind of, you train, the data set on this and then start asking questions, right? So I can ask something like this. Hey, what? So yeah, it's not just, just font of time I'm using some of these pre-defined questions, but otherwise I can even go and ask, hey, let me ask something like that. So all these kind of stuff, it's like even it also does a decent job with spelling. All these kind of questions, you can just ask rather than, it's like, while I'm not saying, this is her replacement for the dashboards, what it really makes you, or rather what really makes this stand out is your ability to ask any kind of questions. Absolutely, whether it is a visual or, or just a simple voice response or a specific number. I have this data sets here, there are like 300. So I can go and look at these underlying data on these. And there are also a whole bunch of, say, for example, other insights. Say I can ask, hey, so on a specific time frame, I'm just asking a question like this, right? So it gives me a trend. Say, for example, I would also like to do a simple forecast. I can go here, I can ask for, hey, show me a forecast. It'll, yeah. So what you see here, the one on the purple, those are the forecast items. It's like the one on the red is let me I can do a full. So that's the forecast, it can do. Or say, for example, let me ask a question like this. Hey, so it just gives me this number. Hey, this is $95,000 is what. So what I can also do is I can understand, hey, what is really bringing, I can ask for something like, hey, give me the contributing factors. It does, and it just says, those orders, these are the shipment modes that were used. And hey, this is spread across these cities within text. And, these are the different categories. All these kind of answers, whatever you get, it's like, the application does it. One key thing which I really want to highlight is it's without writing a single line of code, right? Just contrast this to, doing this with a BI report or a dashboard, where every time you may have to do some work, even if it is in the self-service mode, somebody has to build these charts or build these, missing metrics. Um, our platform kind of takes it as absolutely, it is dynamic. Once you train the data, it just brings back whatever, that particular, it's just limited to the attributes in the data set. That's it. Right, say for example, so there is this glossary here. Hey, these are the different data elements I have. They are grouped by numbers, or you can call it as, what we call in the BI world as measures, the different categories. One thing which I also would like to highlight here is, when we are talking about a language interface, right? It's I mean, the human English language, it always has what we call as a vocabulary, right? I mean, you may refer to the same term by different, say, for example, I have something like city here. I can, city can also be called as, place or location or something, right? It's this, in fact, it's a very common problem in the data world, what we call as the data glossary, or how do you map the business terms with the technical terms, what is used really within the database or something like that, right? So say, for example, I can ask this question. So show me the sales by city, or I can even ask the same question by, say, by location. And then, it's still going to produce the same results, because I have defined in here, I have defined, so it's like also call this place, location, and all that. So this kind of gives you the flexibility to have your business users ask the question in exactly how they would use it in the business context, right? Rather than remembering, the technical names, column names, and all that. I think this is kind of, it's one way, we also use this to solve this problem around, metadata and the data glossary problem. How do we make it easy for the business users, to consume the information, right? Say for example, customer name, it need not be customer underscore and all this, you can call it as client, customer, whatnot. Even if there are more terms, which you're figuring it out over a period of time, it's just a question of retraining that model, with this additional synonym, and then that kind of, it's going to enrich the vocabulary. And the application would be able to, understand, or rather, it's able to, respond back using those. So this is one interface, what we call is the search. It's just like how you have a simple search bar, and then, you just ask the question. The another way, I'll just come back to this in like a couple of minutes, before I just a few more slides here, and then I'll just come back to this, right? So what exactly is Kia? The platform we talked about. It just helps you get instant answers and more on the questions. And in fact, the way we call it as it's like business intelligence, being reimagined for the AI. It's what we do is we take the data, however large it is, we build our own models, and then Kia has an ability to understand the question in English and respond back, with the data set. I think, in both visuals and all. That's exactly what it does behind the scenes, right? So, or in other words, as I said, what we're really trying to do is when a user has an information need, can they really have a conversation with Kia? And then, and then take actions and all that. That's the whole idea behind this, without having to write, so much code again and again, to build new metrics and dashboards and all that. In simple terms, this is what it tries to do. How do you turn, as I said, for simple, I just give an example. Hey, you have some very large data set like this. How do we, convert this data, and then, for someone to just ask questions, and then, for that application to respond back in numbers and visuals and all that, right? I think that's pretty much what the platform does. Um, Almost it kind of supports on most of, I would say, the popular database systems. Completely runs on cloud, Azure, AWS. It's cloud vendor, cloud platform agnostic. It's in fact, most of the popular database systems, or even while there are, applications which make use of these database systems, even simple use case like you have an Excel sheet, or rather, a CSVs. That's what I was really showing in the very first example at the beginning. You use the mobile app, and all these different sources are like your contacts, and then, you can just ask those questions. You can see, in fact, going back to this demo, I mean, I can just pick and choose any data set here. So say, for example, I can go and pick another one. Let me go here. So yeah, I can even go something on and say there is this bus safety data, so it's like all these kind of data sets, these are almost like your contacts. And then, you just switch the context and start asking some of the questions. Say here, I can go and ask, hey, he's just going to get me that data relevant to that data set. I think that's what, it does, right? So how do you, I mean, really achieve this? Even as I said, we call it as a low code platform and all that. So Kia can connect to any kind of data. As I said, I was mentioning about all popular database systems, files. It can listen to applications, so that way it can get the data through APIs. And of course, data is not static. Data, continuously flows, whether it is through streams like Kafka, Event Hub, or anything, or microbatch, or you can schedule every day. You can have these models retrained with the data set. So it's one thing. First step is, Kia has to be connected to data, and you build a vocabulary. I mean, very essential step for a language interface. I was talking to you about, how do you define synonyms? How do you make the technical terms usable, with business terms and all that? Those are all it's a very, very essential step for a language interface. By the way, the application, I'll quickly show you, the application is also smart enough to recommend synonyms. When it sees a column by name city, it would say, hey, it would automatically say, hey, what, location, place, all these things could be synonyms. I mean, the user has an option to either accept those or rather, add their own synonyms and all that. So that way, when people use Kia to ask those questions, it just responds back with those, right? So definitely building the vocabulary was one very important step, for a language interface. And then use any of these interfaces, whether it is the search, I'll just quickly show you another one, which is the chat interface or the mobile app, which I just showed you. And the third thing is, once you have an answer, like the example I gave you, hey, show me the orders, which are like below certain numbers, you ask. So it brings a bunch of, for these, perhaps, for these customers, you may want to integrate it with your CRM application to run a marketing campaign. Or maybe, you're just looking at, say your infrastructure spend. You see that certain expenses gone down. Maybe, you want to assign it to somebody to act on it. So you can create a task or you can email this to somebody. All of these kind of, integrating it with the, the business applications, all those things. I'll just show an example shortly, or possible. I mean, there are quite a bit of out of the box integrations, we have, but at the same time, it's like, it's very, very easy to build any integrations, which are like API enabled and all that. And completely, it's cloud based. When I say cloud, doesn't mean you have to bring your data to our cloud. I mean, ours is available as SaaS, but most of our enterprise implementations are happen within your firewall. The data doesn't go out, the data doesn't have to go out, the data stays in your databases, and then we kind of bring our application to your firewall, and then it runs closer to your data set. So we do have both the options. As I said, most of our enterprise implementations, for security reasons and all that, I mean, nothing goes out. The application kind of runs within your firewall, very closer to your data. But at the same time, we do have the SaaS offering. I mean, we do have very secure Kia Cloud that can be used. I mean, you have your own account, you have your own data isolation where you can have an application up and running. I mean, there are a lot of small enterprises, who do not have their own data centers. I mean, so definitely we do have a secure data cloud, guaranteeing the security and privacy and all that. So there is a SaaS offering as well, right? And as I said, even though I call it as 5 minutes, in fact, very small data set, that's all it takes. Basically, what I really wanted to highlight here was I mean, nobody has to write a single line of code to produce something like this. The whole application is white labeled. It reflects your brand. Even though it is called Kia, our installations are kind of personalized. Some customers call it as Twinkle, Ginger, Erica, whatnot. I mean, it is almost like having your own personalized Alexa, Siri, and all that, right? So it is a completely white labeled application. And so the ecosystem, as I said, there is a whole bunch of interfaces, Studio. So with this, let me also show you to another version of that application. What we call as the chat. It is almost like how we have. Sorry, session expired. Again. While it's loading, so this is the application, where you can load your, say for example, this is how you train your data sets, right? I mean, I showed you quite a bit, on the sales data sets, the customer calls, and all that. So it's like, say for example, this is almost like the low code interface where you train your data set for care. So I click on adding a data set. It could be anything, it can be a database, or it can be from an application using REST APIs, or streaming data, or it can listen to a database. So I can, if it is, there is a whole bunch of, basically we have to tell where is this going to get the data from, right? All those stuff, including the authentication methods and all that. Or I can just upload it from a simple CSV, and then, it'll be able to load the data. Once you have done that, this is, so it's, so let's just take this one, so it is the logistics data set, which I have. So there is a whole bunch of stuff which you do through this interface. So say, for example, take this is what I was saying, data attribute name is actually called mode underscore of shipment and all that. I can just call it as mode. Or I can even, I'll be able to, I can add another synonym called, hey, so this way, this is the way, you kind of define your vocabulary. And once you just use this interface to build this, and in like, once the user is done with it, we kind of train the model, and then, which is consumed by Kia to respond to questions. There's a whole bunch of stuff, you can do here, setting up, schedules, maybe this data set, you can even make it real-time update, or maybe it gets updated at a specific point in time, or time of the day and all that. You can just, or you can even do a manual refresh, so that the data gets, and Kia is always able to respond to the most recent data and all that, right? All these stuff, you just you can define your own custom metric, or you can do all of that, right, using this interface. Once you have done that, so let me show you this another channel which we call as a chat. So it's let me, yeah, I can even ask this one. Hey, it's like, show me the facility. This is one healthcare data set. It's I have, but you asked this question, where you had the maximum number of visits for chemotherapy. So it just gives me this data. There is a whole bunch of details. So one thing I can show here, just let me go back to. See, in fact, we even use Kia for, say for example, this is a good example, where how people are using Kia, even that usage itself is available, it's like I can ask, hey, so it's just going to respond back even to that, in terms of how we've been using this application. What happened? Okay, yeah, it always happens during a demo. So let me show you, let me switch to another database here. Okay, let me go to this one. Okay, so the one, where I was saying, hey, it's like, so let me go and create a new. All the questions you asked, they all, it's just like almost, your search history, you have it in your inbox. So let me ask another question here. Hey, show me the customer who gave us the maximum sales in Texas. So this is for this, say, for example, for this particular data, I want to run a campaign, or maybe, I want to send them a coupon or something like that. Here, I can just go and do a whole bunch of integrations. This is what I was saying. Maybe, I just want somebody to do that. Say, we have few integrations here for this demo, it's like I can create a task in Notion, assign it to somebody. All of this kind of happens here. Or the another one is, say, for example, you see that, someone needs to do something like this, right? What you can do is, just like, I can go and ask another friend, team member, Matthew, who's really responsible for this region, right? I can bring him to the chat, and both Matthew and me, now we can chat on this. Okay, let me. Here, and we can chat on this, and then, ask this question, hey, it's, and he can also respond this way, right? We are just eliminating the problem of, hey, what, if not for this device, the way I would have done is I would have taken a screenshot of this, send it to him in an email, and then, he will respond back. Avoiding time for all of that, is what we know we're really achieving here by, it's almost like, how we use Slack, Teams, or anything for our collaboration. Similarly, can we use a similar interface, even for data? I mean, without, where the users kind of collaborate within that application, and then, try to do an analysis, or, or rather look at the same amount of data, right? Say, I like this question, I can make it as my favorite, or, all those things, I can do here, right? And so whatever I make it as a favorite, it just shows up here. And I mean, something like, some metric or some question which I may want to revisit again and again. There is another interesting feature I just want to show here. While you have an ability to ask these kind of questions, say for example, you have a presentation coming up for tomorrow, your sales thing. So I say that, hey, you know what? Hey, okay, so I ask a question. I like this. Hey, I would like to use this for my presentation. So what I can do is I'll add it to, I call it as, hey, so I create a story like this. I'll say, hey, this is so something like this, and then I add it here. Now, it asks me something, hey, would you like to? So I just split it by segment, and then I get another metric here. So this, I go and add it to my story for tomorrow. I add it here. And then, so I say, hey, show. So I just ask another metric like this. So even this, I would like to add it to my storyboard. So which is like my presentation for tomorrow, right? I have done it. So I have, if you go to my, what we call as the life stories. Why do we call life stories? I'll just tell you in a bit. So this is the one which I just created, right? So what happens, say it's like, let me also pull it here. This would be a better interface. So let me just the same questions, all of that, I can also use it in across any of these channels. Okay, so this is the one which I used. So give me 1 second. Yeah, so I go to live stories. I have my story here. I play the live stories. It almost kind of, creates an interface which is very similar to, it's like like a presentation. It's just that the data, what you see or what you showcase, it is not static. It kind of it's whenever you're talking about it, it is not really images shown in a presentation or something. These are like real data which it's going to fetch, and kind of that's why we call it as a live story. It's um you have an ability to, when you're presenting it, in a slideshow mode. I mean, if there is a voice interface, it will also respond back when you present it. So it gives you the ability to look at those metrics at the time of, when you're really presenting, right? That's one, feature. So it's while we are moving away from dashboards, um, this kind of also gives the users the ability to build their own dash. I mean, without writing a code. I think that is the common underlying theme here. Without the need for someone to spend time, to create these charts and visualizations and all that, you give the power to the business folks, and then now they have the ability to ask anything, put together in the bunch of data points which they can convey as a story or a presentation and all that, right? So now coming back, so that's the Kia ecosystem. We started with the mobile platform, the search interface, and then the chat. And by the way, the whole the application can also be made available as, say, in Microsoft Teams as a Teams bot or a Slack bot and all that, right? Or I mean, for people who would have seen, so say for example, if you take Twitter, you could embed this within any of your web application. Say you have some other application, where just for the data part alone, you want to embed this response just with the search, as another component. You can do that as well. It's just a very simple. You can call a Kia API. It will respond back, with a very simple couple of lines of JavaScript code. You can just embed it within your application. So what we call as embeddables, right? You can do this in your blogs or anywhere. You can embed this response just like how you would embed, say, a YouTube video or a Twitter feed and all that. Whenever I say something like this, quote unquote, it goes without saying, taking care of security, who can access this and all that. I think, that's absolutely one of the, the fundamental step in any data application, right? So at a high level, what does it provide? It's a white labeled application. We just talked about any data source, any size, ability to ask questions in English, in multiple response formats and all that. What the platform kind of really offers is the time to market. I mean, you can just get an application up and running. All we need is the data set. Once we are able to train that, I think, it's just completely dynamic. You have an application up and running in, it's like few days. And I just wanted to highlight this part as well, since we are talking about data. Here, I mean, the whole application is secure by design. There are various controls we have in place for role-based access control. It's like, how do you take care of sensitive information? If you have PII's information, I mean, the PII information, once you mark them as PII, it kind of, they are obfuscated or masked by default in the response, shown as asterisk. You can also selectively, enable it for few users. So there is a whole data governance module, which comes with it, completely secure, cloud, and then also, there is an explainable AI feature, in terms of how Kia really understood that. Say, for example, what I mean by that is, when I ask a question like this, right, we kind of tell you how did it produce this answer. So explain kind of tells you, hey, you know what, this is the information, this is the way, you're operating, this is the filter I applied. Even though you 2019, it says, hey, starting from the 1st of January. So it kind of makes it transparent to the user, in terms of how it really understood the question and how it really produced that answer, right? All these things, come out of the box in that application. The whole thing, kind of runs on Azure, but at the same time, it is cloud neutral. I mean, our platform can run on AWS, GCP, or anything, but right. Just quickly, last few slides in terms of, how some of our customers are using it, or where they are really using it, right? As I said, the first thing is simplified access, a very simple search bar interface. You can just put it, and then, that is one, what we call as a question widget, right? You can, I mean, it is white labeled, so you can embed the search bar within any of your application. And the mobile one, which I showed at the beginning, whether it is in an iPad, Android or iOS, you can, just like how we would use a messaging app, you can use this app to ask any question. Say, for example, even if it is very simple project management data. Okay, so say, for example, you're using Azure DevOps or Jira, you can connect here to this. So you don't have to log in to say, for example, you are in a meeting, someone says, hey, the quality is so bad. How many open defects you have? A lot of open defects. At this particular moment, we would be like, hey, how many open defects do we have if you do not have the data point, right? Rather than logging into that application, you can just ask here, hey, how many open defects do it's going to respond back. So those kind of momentary information needs, I think that's where the mobile application kind of, plays a key role in this, right? The collaboration part, I showed you the Kia chat application, Kia, you, and then whoever is responsible for the team could chat, and then, look at the same piece of information and all that. Uh, Actionable insights, it comes packaged with a whole bunch of integrations, but it's also very easy for us to build additional integrations, which is anything, which is enabled with APIs. It's kind of, more like the reverse ETL problem. We're also trying to solve that here. Once you have the data insights, how do you really make the data actionable and taking it back to the business application? This is especially in some of the legacy applications, I'll tell you, it's a very common use case. If you go to large banks, insurance companies, they all have huge number of hundreds of legacy reports, whether it is or crystal reports or SSRS and whatnot. Rather than trying to re-engineer those reports, if you train the data model, and then in Kia, it's you have a very dynamic reporting interface now. People can run those reports as questions, and there is a whole delivery mechanism available, in terms of you can schedule delivery. You can say that, hey, every Friday evening at 5 p.m. run this report, send this to a location, or send this to different people. The report scheduling part, the distribution part, all of that kind of comes as part of this interface. Quite a bit of happy customers, where we have some very good installations. People are across the industry, who are using this. And as I said, it's very, very simple, or rather, easy to use. And we would be more than happy, I know it was a quick demo and session today, but happy to do a consultation, or rather, if you really want to do a deep dive on the technology, how we do it, or even, we do quite a bit of, definitely free taste tests. If you want to quickly do a POC, feel free to reach out to us. The email is there, or we would also share this recording for the session today. Bottom line, I think, this is where Kia helps. If you really look at 3 points, the changing BI needs, definitely the business intelligence or the information platforms are getting reimagined. How is this going to evolve in the coming years, right? Complete information platform, not just about getting answers. How do you really make them actionable and all that? And the most important thing is around cost optimization. I mean, companies do spend a whole lot of money in data engineering, business, various BI tools and reports. Whatever you see on the left side of that balance, I mean, application the development costs versus the different ETL tools, the BI tools, collaboration, all of that kind of packaged into a platform. I think that's where the significant cost savings in terms of total cost of ownership is going to come, right? So in summary, this is what Kia is. Very simple conversational interface. For the modern world, it's like just like how we would chat with a friend. Can we really have a similar interface for data? Is the problem we are trying to solve here.